Listeners, I see Michael already smiling. He anticipates what I would say. My good friend.
Yeah, and I put my head on a block, and I offer Mr. Brother Bishop the scalpel to cut it off.
The political leader has said several times up to last night that is not a reflection of her personal views or the views of the party. And you understand, George, how elections at the party level work.
So, Dr. Pei, do you have ties? Do you have ties to the National Democratic Congress, Dr. Pei? Or rather, were you commissioned by the NDC to do this poll?
Information because it seems interesting that a lot of your advice is very consistent with what was said. Brilliant.
And Claudette, good luck with everything.
You too, man. May the best candidate win in the town of St. George.
But kill on.
Yes.
You is a tongue man too, so stop it up. Tell everybody you are a tongue man too.
We are a people who have always aspired for more. Who've always aspired to do better. Who've always accepted that not because your mother didn't go to secondary school, you should go. It has always been the other way around. You should aspire.
You've been there for a long time. Want to be queen of St. Andrews, but yet the problems around you you're not seeing. You can pray yourself out of the problems in St. Andrews.
And if you're not careful with how and what you say on radio, you will cause people to fight here.
I thrive on that controversy. Some people hate it, but I love it. In other words, every time something goes viral, it's about Kem Jones.
Some persons were getting pension after 2 terms in office, right? And the persons that work for 26 years plus not getting anything. It's just unfair.
God is good, and God looks after me. You know, not just my wife is no longer here, so both herself and the father up there are looking after me very, very well indeed.
Not a few people that you pick up by the side of the road to run in an election. These are not people that you mustered up and you pulled together a few months before you think an election is going to call, and you say we want to win an election, so let's come together.
Hello and welcome to the March 5th edition of the Bubb Report. This week on our program, we will hear why one Trinidadian columnist is bemoaning the decay of traditional Caribbean carnivals as we know them. In a recent Newsday op-ed, Paulo Kernahan said, quote, "It's a bitter irony that a festival born of the elite, then claimed by the proletariat, has swung back to the elite. Now the peasantry pays for the honor of economic enslavement. They whip themselves for the opportunity to grow the wealth of the few," unquote. We speak with Kernahan, who will articulate his view on the evolution of the Caribbean's biggest cultural expression. Also on the reports, Labour leaders react to the firing of the recently installed Labour Commissioner in St. George's, Valerie Thomas. Last week, Labour Minister Claudette Joseph announced her firing by offering a very opaque justification for doing so.
Upon review of the state of the relationship as requested by the Public Service Commission, it was decided by the Commission and the Ministry that it will be best for us to go back to the drawing board with, in our search for a Labour Commissioner that fits with the the personnel and also with our general outlook as we seek to take steps to enhance the labor climate in Grenada for workers, for employers, and specifically for the members of staff at the Labor Ministry who are delivering on the services to our stakeholders.
The report will also sit with a veteran trade unionist and educator who is vying to become the second vice president of the Grenada Union of Teachers. Later in our program, we look at this week's NDC convention. This is the first convention the Congress will be holding since they won last year's national poll. Sources say that MIT Minister Andy Williams plans to challenge Larry Barry as General Secretary. There may also be an open race for the post of Deputy Political Leader, currently held by Adrian Persuader Thomas. We welcome our guests. Paulo Kernahan, Trinidad Newsday columnist. Senator Andre Lewis, President of the Technical and Allied Workers Union. Ernest Richardson, educator and GUT trade unionist. And William Joseph, political commentator. Here is Dr. Kellon Bubb, our host with this week's editorial titled Patriarchal Violence and Gender Inequality: The Burden of Women in a Shifting Global Context. Please remember to share this live stream. We thank you for joining us.
A pleasant good morning to our viewers and listeners, and we welcome you to yet another edition of the Bubb Report. I am your humble servant, Dr. Kellon Bubb, and we thank all of you for joining us this Sunday. We know that Sunday mornings are a time when most folks are getting their chores done, but of course we also want to welcome our housewives and house husbands who are at home preparing lunch and doing the house chores this morning as well. Now, this month we celebrate Women's History Month. 1 in 3 women will experience physical or sexual violence in her lifetime. While there is no single case for such violence, some of the strongest and most consistent factors are harmful social norms that contribute to gender inequality. These norms are based on shared beliefs and expectations about how people, especially women, should behave. They include male entitlement, domination, and control over the bodies of women and girls, and rigid gender roles, as highlighted in an Oxfam research from 12 countries across Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean. Now, the Oxfam research found 10 problematic areas that women continue to confront. The first one is that women must be submissive to male family members in all aspects of her life. Rigid gender roles often result in the expectation that women be submissive to male family members. When married, women are expected to obey their husbands, act according to their wishes, and not strive for equal decision-making in the process. If they were to transgress these norms, they may face physical violence used by husbands as punishment or discipline. Secondly, men are expected to exercise coercive control, while women and girls are expected to be submissive. Men are expected to exercise power and control in their families and relationships, which can manifest in various ways. In dating relationships, male dominance can appear in the form of monitoring mobile phones and social media. 3, men have the right to discipline women for incorrect behavior. The Oxfam research revealed that there is a strong belief among both men and women that violence is acceptable and even necessary when used by men to discipline women for not delivering on their perceived responsibilities or when their behavior transgresses social norms. The research found that physical violence was justified when a woman does not obey her husband. 4. Women cannot deny their male partner's sex in intimate partner relationships. Women's and girls' choices over their bodies are dominated and controlled by their male partners and the belief that women's bodies should always be available to men. These norms also contribute to intimate partner rape and other forms of abuse, which are the most common form of violence against women and girls in Latin America and the Caribbean. 5. Sexual harassment is normal. Dominant partners around male sexual entitlement over women's bodies contribute to sexual harassment and other forms of sexual violence. In Colombia, for example, a young woman stated, quote, "I believe that everything arises from the fact that men see us as sexual object and as persons they need to fulfill their sexual needs with," unquote. 6. Women experience violence because they are dressed provocatively, quote unquote. Among the countries involved in the study, it is common to see communities blaming the actions of women to justify male sexual entitlement and violence. Stigma is often placed on those who have experienced violence, blaming the survivor of abuse. 7 out of 10 young men in the Caribbean aged 15 to 19 blamed women for violence they experienced because they were dressed provocatively or out on the street late at night. 7. All women should become mothers. Violence against women and girls is rooted in the patriarchal power imbalance between men and women and in the dominant belief that men protect and provide for and have authority over their family, and good women prioritize their family's health and well-being. After marriage, women's most important roles are to serve their husbands and to have and to raise their children. 8. Girls are valued as wives, not as individuals. For girls, the social expectation is to demonstrate submissiveness, and that can lead to early marriage, which is also used to control their sexuality. The bodies of girls are often seen as assets that can depreciate or appreciate in value, depending on community perceptions and notions about honor and contributing to early marriage. In Nigeria, for example, this was summarized as follows, quote, "You are worth more as a wife than as a daughter," unquote. 9. Heterosexuality is the only sexual orientation that is acceptable. Discrimination and marginalization make some women and girls more likely to experience violence. This includes women and girls with disabilities, divorced women and widows, sex workers, and lesbian and transgender women. 10. Divorced women have less value. Divorced women and widows face particular forms of violence because of discriminatory beliefs around the roles and value of women. In Papua New Guinea, for example, the research highlighted the marginalization of divorced women and widows who are seen as having less value since they do not have the monetary value of the price of a bride anymore. Furthermore, they are considered to be property of the family in law who paid for them in the first place. Therefore, they are not respected in the families and often not protected against violence. Now, as we celebrate the triumphs of our women this month, we must also refocus on what it means to create gender equality. It means better paid leave policies, including sick leave and a higher minimum wage. It means enforcement of laws against sex discrimination and pregnancy discrimination, as well as subsidized high-quality childcare for women. Remember, the hand that rocks the cradle certainly rules the world. Happy Women's Month and happy International Women's Day to all our women folk around the world. And at this time, I wish to welcome our first guest for this morning's program. He is Mr. Paulo Kernahan. I hope I was able to get your pronunciation correct again.
Yes, you got it right on the first try, which is quite unusual for most people.
I suppose as we're both in the business of journalism, so editing is something that comes naturally to us, I suppose. But welcome to the Bubb Report, sir, and thank you for accepting our invitation on such short notice.
Well, no, I should thank you for inviting me, Dr. Bubb, and giving me an opportunity to, well, I suppose expand on some of the thoughts I expressed in my column. I just want to clarify a point that was made in your opening. I didn't write a column based on my observations about carnivals in the region, but really
okay,
more
it was
Trinidad.
based on Trinidad, correct?
Yes,
but I do believe, I do believe, however, that that column resonates, and it would resonate with our Grenadian audience in so many ways. There are Grenadians who have been speaking to a lot of the issues that you raised. So what is happening in Trinidad certainly is a rubric, I would say, for what is also happening in other parts of the Caribbean as well. So we want to get into it. We certainly want to get into it. First and foremost, this was billed as the mother of all carnivals in Trinidad. They called it the return. So the expectation was that this year's carnival in Trinidad was to be epic. Full confession, full disclosure. I also play mass in Trinidad with Lost Tribe for the very reason that Lost Tribe still maintains the traditional aspect of carnival. But we want to get into the article that you mentioned. The article that you wrote in the Newsday, which was shared multiple times on social media. Now, one of the points you make in that article is the bitter irony that you saw in Carnival. And you said that the festival that was born of the elite, then claimed by the proletariat, has swung back to the elite. Now, the peasantry pay for the honor of economic enslavement. They whip themselves for the opportunity to grow the wealth of a few, unquote. Can you expand on what you meant by that? Are we seeing a class consciousness type of carnival these days, of between the haves and the have-nots?
Well, what is happening is this is a natural, certainly in Trinidad, natural evolutionary process in carnival, and it's something that has been happening for certainly more than a decade in carnival, and that is the rise of the mega band. And when I say mega band, I mean in the context of commercialization. And let me be very clear. I think many people interpreted my column to be a condemnation of that type of commercialization, but I believe commercialization of the mass is important if we are to preserve it. If there is no money to be made, it's very difficult to see how the mass can be carried on for future generations. The problem is, as I indicated in the column, when business interests are allowed to hold sway, then there becomes a lack of balance. And the more traditional elements of mass, which you have the traditional mass depictions, the Bat Mass, Dame Lorraine, Midnight Robber, those tend to get pushed to the edges because the commercial interests, businesses that invest in carnival, they are primarily interested in one type of carnival, and that is what is referred to most often as pretty mass, or some people would call pejoratively naked mass, because that is where they believe their consumer interests are most often met. So they will invest the lion's share of money in that kind of mass, leaving traditional mass characters and traditional mass depictions sort of scrambling to get the financing and to get the commercial interest that they need to carry on those traditions. So that's what I mean. It's important that we have successful business operators who are able to transform the mass and make it something that can live on into the future. But when we have just that one form of mass, which is commercially oriented mass, well, the other aspects of mass, which are the birth of our carnival, well, those tend to suffer.
And you say you're seeing that in Trinidad. In fact, what you say in the article is that it would appear as if the traditional aspects of carnival tend to be relegated to the background.
Yeah. I can also say that because I have produced a documentary on traditional mass characters. And in interviewing those people, people who portray the Dame Lorraine traditional mass character and the Midnight Robber in particular, when they try to go out onto the stages, onto the streets to portray this mass, they are drowned out by the music trucks. even if they go onto the Queen's Park Savannah stage during intervals between the arrivals of the bands on stage, and they're meant to be a sort of a, I wouldn't say filler because that would be a derogatory term, but they're meant to be entertainment for the spectators while the mass bands are making their way to the stage. They can't deliver their performances because they're drowned out by the DJs. So there's a sort of an undercurrent of undermining traditional mass, and it's being overtaken by what is now accepted as carnival, the new form of carnival, which is the music trucks, the large bands with their Shutterstock costumes. And that is more or less pushing the mass to the fringes, the traditional mass to the fringes. And again, it's very important to note that people seem to think that traditional mass is in the position that it's in because they are unable, for some reason, for one reason or another, to find ways of attracting commercial interest. But there's a legitimate reason for that. Businesses that invest in carnival aren't interested in traditional mass because they don't think that they will get bang for their buck if they put money behind the traditional mass characters. I don't know if it's because they've come to the conclusion that their audience is not going to be interested in traditional mass, and that's not true at all. That is really the one unique element that's left in Trinidad Carnival, is the traditional mass and the steel band. Those are the only original elements of the mass in Trinidad and Tobago, carnival, that is. So it's not true to say that these bands are incapable of attracting sponsorship funding because their product is somehow inferior or unattractive. That's just the nature of a small economy. That's how small economies work, and that attracts all the funding to one sector where people will have to gamble on this sector attracting them the best return for their investment. And that leaves a lot of traditional mass characters and traditional mass portrayals out in the cold or the heat, as the saying goes.
And to piggyback on what you just said, I mean, when we think about Caribbean carnivals, and of course we will get into that conversation later, but one would expect that if I am to travel to Barbados, I am to want to experience what is unique about Bajan Carnival. If I travel to Grenada, I would want to experience what is unique about Grenadian Carnival. Similarly, if I travel to Trinidad and Tobago, I would want to experience what is unique in the context of Trinidad's Carnival. Now, I seem to see a pattern where, especially with the large costume bands, where there doesn't seem to be a distinction between the types of costumes that we see in Barbados versus the types of costumes that we see in Trinidad. It's as if, you are in a different destination, but the costumes are the same. And again, that does not portend for any carnival to be unique anymore. I want you to expand on that idea.
Well, I should point out, I'm not involved directly in carnival myself, so I'm not intimately aware of how it works. But from my understanding of it, a lot of the carnival that happens elsewhere in the region is influenced by Trinidad Carnival. So the costuming would be exported to other islands, and therefore that the aesthetic of our carnival will influence other carnivals in the region, and that is why you get the kind of you will likely get the kind of sameness that I described in the column. Now, when you speak about traditional mass characters and traditional mass portrayals, like for example the Blue Devils, which is very, very popular, and it's really a sort of an elemental form of carnival in Trinidad. That is a very unique aspect of mass portrayal in Trinidad. I believe you also have the devils in Grenada as well, and that is
the jab, yeah.
And that is what is very unique about the festival, and it's still alive in this country. But again, people seem to think that a thing needs to be dead in order to be worried about it, and I think that we need to start having these discussions before we reach the extinction stage. It doesn't, because we still have it and it's around, it doesn't mean that it's something that's not in need of preservation. So what you described, the phenomenon that you described, that sort of sameness that sort of spreads across the region and in their observation of carnival, is quite likely because of what's happening here. The sort of, and of course, a lot of the style in the carnival and the pretty mass costuming that we see today we sort of inherited from Brazilian masks in many ways. So that's how it works. The sort of thing spreads throughout the region and it gains currency. And again, a lot of people who misinterpreted what I said, they assume that I'm railing against the free will of the market and that people should have the right to choose what they want. They should have the right to choose the kind of costumes that they want, but they do. They do have that freedom of choice. And that's why we're seeing this, well, the overwhelming appearance of sameness in the mass. The costumes are fairly indistinct. They more or less look the same. That's the point I'm making. Customers, mass portrayers, revelers, they all do have access to that free will. They can buy whatever they want. But that's the problem. As I've said, it attracts most of the money that allows the mass to continue to propagate itself. And that, again, leaves traditional mass characters left out of the loop, as it were.
Now, you also made the point in the article that there has been a decline in spectator participation in this year's carnival. Now, what would you say accounts for that? And would it be fair to say, though, that many might have just stayed away from carnival this year owing to the fact that it was just the first real carnival since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, and as such, they might want to see the kinks of carnival to be ironed out and resolved before getting back into the fray. But in your article, you talk about, and if I can quote from your article here, you talk about the nudity that we see in carnival these days, not unique to Trinidad. It's happening. It's happening all over. But you say there are probably two main reasons for dwindling spectator interest. One, surging violent crime is one factor, but additionally, there is both very little and too much to see. Parents of young children probably aren't keen on explaining why a half-naked woman has her buttocks pointed skyward while a man is pounding, not whining, on her behind, trying to grind her into chalk dust.
Well,
I thought that was so well written, by the way.
I observed two of the possible reasons for declining spectator interest, but I'm quite sure there's a multitude of factors. As you've alluded to, COVID-19 is probably one of them. People have these lingering fears about the spread of COVID-19, so they will have decided to stay away. There are many other reasons. Transportation for some is a key issue. Getting into and out of the city can be problematic for many people, and people who would ordinarily have gone decided I could do without that headache, so they stayed away. But I focused on two of the main issues as expressed by people in the city. You have said, well, look, I just don't think it's worth it to go into the city because there's not much to see. But also, there is that aspect of people who would be reluctant to have their children exposed to what Carnival has become in many ways predominantly, which is that sort of more adult-themed Carnival. And they wouldn't want, I mean, when I was a child, my father used to take me into the city to see Carnival all the time. And I could imagine if he was taking me into the city to see the Carnival of today, he would have a lot of questions to answer on the way home. And I think many parents don't want to have their children grow up over the space of 2 days and having to sort of rush to explain why people behave this way and why Carnival looks the way it does. And again, a lot of people interpreted my comments as a statement about the lewdness of Carnival and my pronouncing on it. I'm not a prude in any way. I was just offering one possible reason, as expressed by spectators themselves, as to why they might be staying away. And that there are many factors, but that was two of them. The surging crime, people's feelings of insecurity, and what the Carnival looks like today. People are uncomfortable, again, having to explain to their children or block their children's eyes, in the face of the kind of costuming and the depictions of that kind of costuming in the streets.
Then you make the point about the lingerie Victoria's Secret devolution of mass. You suggested that the cookie cutter type of costume mass that bands bring to the fore are putting traditional mass to the fringes. What would you say? And of course, you spoke extensively earlier about that commercial motivation for that to happen. But how do you see us going back from the brink, if you will?
Well, what I think is going to have to happen is I would definitely advocate for some of the corporate entities in Trinidad and Tobago to take ownership of, to adopt traditional mass. And to me, it would make perfect commercial sense because you would have less competition. You wouldn't have to fight for that corner of your own realm in Carnival because you would take it over. For example, with Kiddies Carnival, Sunshine Snacks, which is a subsidiary of a major company in Trinidad and Tobago, Able, they have claimed ownership of Kiddies Carnival for many years. And I can certainly see a scenario in which a major corporate sponsor would take ownership of traditional mass. And I'm quite sure that some do, but not to the extent that we would all like. Moreover, I believe that that balance can be achieved in part by government policy. The National Carnival Commission receives an allocation. I think the allocation this year was somewhere in the vicinity of $147 million. That, I think, is far more than all of corporate Trinidad and Tobago would spend on Carnival for any given year. So I cannot understand why, if the NCC has access to that kind of allocation, why some of it cannot be funneled to the traditional mass, which again, and this is very important, is the DNA of our Carnival. This is the, I don't want to, well, this is maybe carrying it too far. This is the amniotic fluid of our Carnival. This is where our Carnival came from. This is the unique element of our Carnival. And I don't see any reason why traditional mass cannot be grant funded in some way by the National Carnival Commission if they are getting such. Where does all of that money go? Additionally, I think that the NCC needs to take greater charge or better control of route management, because that has been a real bugbear of Carnival for a very long time. It seems to be chaotic and disorganized, and therefore spectators can never be assured of seeing one thing at a particular point at a particular time of day. There needs to be much better route management to give people, and traditional and modern mass, a space in the city where they can not just express themselves, but provide some kind of value to spectators and visitors to our country. So again, as the column pointed out, I have no objection whatsoever to the rise of modern Carnival, pretty mass. There's space enough for everything, but we have to have balance. And I believe that the National Carnival Commission, with that kind of funding, can play a huge role in establishing policy for the promulgation of traditional mass, education about traditional mass, and, where necessary, funding for traditional mass characters.
I have a question in relation to the transmission of cultural traditions and practices from one generation to the next. Do we have a cultural studies curriculum in schools in Trinidad and Tobago, in the public school system, that enables successive generations of Trinidadian citizens, Trinbagonian citizens, to learn the art of costume making, to learn the value that's associated with traditional mass, to learn steel pan? There was a video that went viral with a school in Trinidad recently in the lead up to Carnival of a steel orchestra. I'm sure that their name is escaping me now, but that particular band went viral, and I'm saying to myself, I wonder if this is actually replicated on a national scale. One of the things I believe in order for our successive generations of sons and daughters to appreciate the mass is for them to be properly educated on the mass. Can you speak to what happens in Trinidad around that question?
I think that's a very good point. That raises a very important question. I'm not intimately aware of what is being done at the level of the Ministry of Education. What I can say is that there does not seem to be any broad policy to create that kind of awareness through education in the secondary schools. I believe some schools have steel pan programs, others may not, but there is no broad umbrella policy that exposes our kids, as far as I'm aware, to these arts. When I was doing my documentary on the traditional mass characters, I spoke with a man by the name of Senor Gomez, who had worked for his entire life and he had perfected the art of wire bending, which was crucial to the development and manufacture of the traditional handmade manufacture of costumes. And when I interviewed him, in a very small apartment on George Street in Port of Spain. And when I went into his apartment, he had all of these pictures hanging on his walls, where he had been invited to different universities, and he would go every year. He was invited to universities in the United States to teach courses on wire bending. And I'd asked him if he was ever invited to be part of any formal program in any of our tertiary institutions in this country. And at the time, he told me, well, no, that was not the case. He had been brought here and there to give a talk or do some sort of demonstration, but there was never any formal arrangement. And that is, unfortunately, really demonstrative of the way we honor our traditions in Trinidad and Tobago. So I would definitely agree with you. And that's why I referred to the establishment of some sort of policy. And part of that policy would be broad-based education in our schools to provide exposure. So because children learn differently, but they're also differently inclined. So there may be some kids who are academically inclined, but there are others who are artistically inclined. And if they're provided with access to that kind of learning, they may flourish under programs like that. They may, and you can adapt it to today's sensibilities. So they could be taught how to use technology to create mass on a commercial scale, but again, at the same time, preserve the traditional elements of mass. There's so many ways that this could be done. And I, in my opinion, that's just not being done. And we've been doing Carnival for far too long to not have something like that in place.
Yeah. And of course, we want to get to some viewer comments. Ricardo Keynes Douglas, who happens to be a Grenadian legend of the creative aspect of Carnival. He's famous for the Sailor Mass, but he's also very famous for advocating as a champion for traditional mass, and he has been bemoaning the same things you've articulated in your article. But I suppose hearing it from outside of Grenada, I suppose makes it resonant in many ways. But let's get to some viewer comments. One viewer is saying maybe we need two different versions of Carnival in the Caribbean islands. The Eurocentric version of Carnival is affecting our Afrocentric version of Carnival. What we refer to as pretty mass is very Afrocentric. The word masquerade is connected to the meaning of disguise. Pretty mass has no real culture of disguising. It represents revealing, which means to show what was hidden. We are lucky in Grenada that traditional masqueraders outnumber those, and then he goes on. But I want to get you to articulate or respond to what this viewer just said.
To my mind, there's room for all. It doesn't have to be one or the other. But if we're going to create a space for all, that requires deliberate action. We can't leave things as they are. We cannot leave traditional mass to its own devices. We can't allow trends to carry on as they are. Otherwise, we're going to have traditional mass characters usurped entirely by commercialized mass. But I want to make it very clear. I believe there's space for all. There's space for the bikini mask that the market obviously overwhelmingly wants. There's space for traditional mask, which people also want, and they demonstrate that desire by putting their money where their mouth is. There's space for Blue Devils. They are tremendously popular. The Cocoa Devils, all of that, the Jab Jab. There is space for all of it. But in order to create a carnival that is multifaceted and that has longevity, we have to do something deliberate to ensure that that space is preserved.
Let us get to another viewer comment here. Onesto, I think some of the clips from the TNT Carnival which circulated on social media platforms was very X-rated, not for the eyes of children. And it was all women in the video clips. I was taken aback to see that Trinidad didn't have Carnival for 2 years. And it wasn't an excuse for such pornographic behavior, I suppose. But despite this, I enjoyed the parading of the bands, the Marche Gras, also the brass competition. I think Carriacou and Petit Martinique, in the context of Grenada, is taking away part of the I'm not following what the viewer is saying, but I think he's saying he enjoyed the other aspects of Carnival. I also enjoyed Panorama, although my band, the All Stars, didn't win. I enjoyed the masquerade. I really celebrated the fact that even though there was no Soca Monarch this year in Trinidad, you did have a Dimasquerade show that was won by somebody who is only, well, I believe he's 19 or 20 years old, right? Let us get to Shireen Thomas. She's saying the same can be said for the fancy mass, where some aspects of costume making had been lost with mass production. For example, the art of wire bending, the same point you were making. This is another important feature of mass production. Let's see here. She's saying some of the costumes are made in Trinidad in reference to, again, the type of cookie cutter type of reality we see all over the Caribbean as well. Ricardo Keynes Douglas, who incidentally, by the way, is the brother of the great Paul Keynes Douglas, who resides in Trinidad, but he's Grenadian. He says Pretty Mass was never about revealing. It was a mass of creativity. It was never about exposing an inch away from showing your private parts. So, and again, he is a griot. He is a griot on this. So he's an expert on Carnival in Grenada. So he knows exactly what he's talking about. Yes.
On that matter of the behavior of some revelers, and I wouldn't say all, but certainly the costuming today, I don't want to focus too much on that because I believe the issue is a lot bigger, but people do feel very strongly about it. They feel that the nakedness sets the wrong tone for, and look, the Caribbean, we are a very conservative society, many of the countries in the Caribbean. So that's this new sensibility, the sort of sexuality and sensuality in Carnival it's a hard fit for societies that are ostensibly conservative. I tend not to focus too much on that because I believe that we can create balance, we can create something for people to see by providing support for the traditional bands that are creating the kind of mass that we knew as mass that came out of the original celebration, the birth of Carnival. And I believe that balance can address these issues, these concerns about the modern portrayals of mass, in which nudity is definitely a feature. If we have more sailor mass, if we have more canboulay, more traditional mass portrayals, I think that there will be enough for spectators to see, and I believe overall it will create a more diverse and better quality product, both for the domestic spectators and foreign visitors.
And before I invite you to offer some closing comments, on Carnival Tuesday, again, like the Mighty Sparrow, they tried to kill the Mighty Sparrow, and remember that famous song that he wrote, "Who killed the sparrow? Nobody know. Sparrow dead." Anyways, so on Carnival Tuesday, in a fit of irony, the rumor went out that the great mass maker, Peter Minshall, he died on it. The rumor was that he died on Carnival Tuesday, which again was, of course, that would have been a fit of irony. Such a legendary mass player, legendary artist, Emmy award-winning mass maker would have died on Carnival Tuesday. Obviously, it was a rumor that he responded to. But how did that play in Trinidad and Tobago when that rumor became viral? When that rumor went viral?
Well, it was a very cruel rumor and the intent is unclear. Well, obviously the intent is mischief, but the end result is unclear. And of course, Peter Minshall responded in grand, amazing fashion to that rumor with his little performance that he recorded on video. I think people reacted so strongly because Peter Minshall is, let's be quite frank, he's one of the greatest contributors to mass and Carnival that we've ever had. Yeah. I'm quite sure many people who grew up in the 80s and 90s remember many of his mass portrayals, rat races. That's stuck in my mind forever. Because his mass was always designed to tell a story. Who can forget Man Crab? Tantan and Saga Boy. The way that
And actually, I have some footage of Tantan and Saga Boy coming up in the break, but I still remember as a child watching Trinidad and Tobago television. At that time, we didn't have cable in Grenada, but I would watch TTT television, and that portrayal still stuck in my head. So go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, it was odd that when people used to look at televised mass, everyone used to, well, this is nice. I waited to see when Peter Minshall comes on, because that was almost like, when you go to see a double in the cinema. Yeah, the first movie is fine, but I really came to see the second one. And Peter Minshall's portrayal, when he came on stage, and his costumes, which told a story, and there was a lot of intellect and artistry that went into all of the work that he did, which is the essence. It is the essence of Carnival. Carnival is a life force. Carnival is a life force, and each human being in Trinidad interprets it in a different way. And Peter Minshall essentially was one of the strongest sources of that life force. And the way he portrayed the mass, it has never been replicated in this country. He is a giant in the artistic community in this country, and has contributed in immeasurable ways to what Carnival looked like, And when that rumor was spread, it was people who believed it and contributed to its spread. Unfortunately, they interpreted this as, well, the final chapter closing on the kind of Carnival that we used to have. And that is why that rumor spread like wildfire, because of what he meant to Carnival and what Carnival no longer is. And there are, thankfully, still many bands, you've mentioned one of them, there's still many bands keen on providing people with that spiritual experience through artistry and costuming. And we would like to see more people like that, more people who are artistically inclined and want to interpret mass in a way that's different from the pretty mass. Those people should be given an opportunity and a leg up to contribute to the kind of world building and mass that we knew when we were growing up as kids in the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Absolutely. This is such a great conversation. We are certainly going to have you back if closer to Grenada's Carnival, which is in August, because again, this conversation on the evolution of mass is not only happening in Trinidad, as we intimated in the introduction, but we as well are having this conversation in Grenada. It's a conversation that we intend to continue to have here on the Bubb Report. But I want to give you an opportunity for some closing comments before we get to the next segment.
Well, thank you. One thing I want people to understand is the column that I wrote was not meant purely as a critique of Carnival. A critique, people often misinterpret the purpose of a critique. Yes, in many ways it was meant to critique Carnival today, but it was a critique meant to force introspection. Let us honestly face Carnival as it is today so that we can sit down and discuss possible solutions for the way forward, solutions that will offer, as I've discussed, a space for all depictions of mass. And Carnival is not one thing, it's many different things. It's pretty mass, it's traditional mass, it's steel pan, it's Cocoa Devils, it's Blue Devils, it's Jab Jab, it is Dame Lorraine, Midnight Robber. It is many different things for which a space can be provided for all. But we can only ensure the survival of all of these fundamental, elemental aspects of our Carnival if we make that space. And that is only going to be achieved through deliberate action.
Absolutely. Mr. Kernahan, thank you so much. You are a former journalist, but you still write in journalistic form. Recovering journalist, I like that term. And certainly, thank you again for appearing on the Bubb Report. This was a very important conversation, and it's a conversation that we need to continue to have. But as we go to the break, folks, we want to we have some footage of Peter Minshall's Tantan and Saga Boy. That was, I believe, from 1991 in King and Queen of the Bands. I do have to say, though, that one of the things I really love about Trinidad when I visit Trinidad for Carnival is to go to the Dimasgra show, to go to Panorama, but in particular in the Dimasgra show, watching the King and Queen of the Bands and the elaborate portrayals that we see in these costumes is just absolutely epic. So I really wish Trinidad would keep that. Okay, viewers and listeners, stand by. We are going to take a quick break, and we would be right back with the panel segment of today. Stand by.
we've ever seen them so involved with each other.
Minchell leads the way in so many aspects of Trinidad Carnival. Beautiful silk material, 100% China silk, and it's really being used to full effect by these two supreme masqueraders.
We haven't mentioned the very vibrant colors as well, because you said there about the silk. Tantan's outfit is in fuchsia pink, trimmed with gold, and a bright emerald green scarf. And of course, her escort has a scarf and a tie in those colors, but his suit is pure white silk.
And of course, the face of Tantan is unmistakably that of Tantan herself, Alison Brown. These heads were painted actually by Peter Minchell himself. This is a first for Carnival.
Well, I would say this has been a very well rehearsed number done here by Tantan and her escort, as they now make their way off the stage. And we really have to say that contestant number 1 makes her way off stage. Tantan, escorted by Sagaboy. That was the first queen appearing in the competition.
And they make way for the second queen. This is Nico.
Should your loved ones pass on, they deserve to be treated with dignity. And at S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, we can provide you with that service. We can take you every step of the way during your sorrowful moments. When that need arises, call S.A. Johnson Funeral Home at 347-777-9797. That's 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home is a Caribbean family-owned funeral home here in Brooklyn, providing funeral services, but in a dignified way. From cremation to burial to the repatriation of your loved ones, you don't have to go through the hassle, as we provide exceptional service that allows you to mourn and heal peacefully. For more information, visit our website, www.sajohnsonfuneral.org. Send us an email at sajfuneral@aol.com. or call 347-777-9797. S.A. Johnson Funeral Home, because you deserve to be treated with dignity.
And welcome back, folks. At this point, we want to welcome our panel segment of the week. We have Senator Andre Lewis, who represents Labor in the Senate. He is also the President General of the Technical and Allied Workers Union. Mr. Andre Lewis, Comrade Lewis, welcome to the Bubb Report. Now, I don't believe that there is a TAU election that we have to be covering this year. So all is quiet on TAU's front, I suppose. And then we have Mr. Ernest Richardson, who is an educator. He's a veteran Grenadian educator, but there is an election happening on the front of the Grenada Union of Teachers, certainly not for the presidency of the union. But of course, we want to have a conversation with Mr. Richardson around his decision to get into the race for the role of second vice president of the Grenada Union of Teachers. But Mr. Richardson, before we do so, I want to begin with Mr. Lewis. Now, Mr. Lewis, last week it was announced by the Minister of Labor that the newly appointed Labor Commissioner was fired. Were you surprised by that firing? Now, in her announcement of the firing of the Labor Commissioner, the minister said that the decision was made, the decision of the firing was made by the Public Service Commission. Now, she didn't say how and why her ministry recommended the firing, only to say that there appeared to be interpersonal differences, which sounded very opaque to me. But I want to get you give you an opportunity to react to that firing.
Okay, good morning, Dr. Bubb. And I can just say, Comrade Bubb, been given our historical tie in terms of struggles. Yes,
Correct.
and my dear brother and comrade, Otis. And good morning to, my brother. Good morning to the listeners of the Bubb Report on the various platforms. Dr. Bubb, specifically, I can simply say that given the high level of commendation and recommendation and accolades that the Labor Commissioner, Ms. Valerie Thomas, came to Grenada with, one certainly was surprised, for want of a better word. And I dare say it has created a bit of confusion and almost possibility of shockwave, certainly through the labor movement. And the reasons that you say that the minister has advanced certainly does not seem to be adding up. What I can simply say, though, is that it appears, and given the level of Ms. Thomas, the high commendations that she came with, one would expect that we will not hear the end of this matter at this moment. And there's a high possibility that Grenada may be faced with some bill, right? Because one would expect that this termination will be challenged. Because one have to understand that the position of Labor Commissioner is a creature of statute. And as you have indicated, and I'm going based on what the minister said, what she have advanced, one of the reasons is that having to do with interpersonal issues. As to whether or not interpersonal issues at a workplace can justify or give rise to termination, there's a lot of doubt on this matter, because it can set certain precedents in various workplaces where there are interpersonal differences, and I'm going on the basis of what has been advanced. Yes, you can have employees in a particular workplace who will say, look, I can't work with a manager, right? Because it's creating disquiet. You can have employees who would raise those various concerns. I know that the ministry seemed to have advanced this as a reason or a justification for termination. It can be opening the possibility of a can of worms. But yes, because I can recall the high level of commendation that Ms. Thomas came to Grenada with.
Yes, she came in highly recommended. I mean, it was as if, we got an actual pie in the sky.
Well, on the plate, a pie on the plate.
A pie on the plate, right? Pie on the plate.
And I dare say, based on our initial interaction with her, she's highly professional. As a matter of fact, I will say something that I may not have said before. We have spoken among ourselves. Because Tau's engagement with Ms. Thomas, she got a baptism of fire during the Port Authority dispute. And we contended among ourselves that, look, after that engagement, we have to ensure that we continue to lift our games because of our presentation. Yes, that we are thoroughly prepared. We prepare whenever we are going to do cases, as you will know from your engagement over the years, right? But we certainly saw in this baptism of fire that you have to be on your P's and Q's in terms of industrial relations matters. Yeah, and that was our baptism of fire. So the reasons that seem to be advanced, or one of the reasons that seem to be advanced, and even if there is a question of interpersonal issues, one would expect that there will be a process. There will be the issue of having discussions. We are now going through a change. There's a change in administration. There are changes within the Ministry of Labor. So one do not know what the issues are, obviously. But I dare say I'm none the wiser after listening to the pronouncements. But there seem to be more questions than answers. And I'm saying, because if on the basis of the highly technical competence, right, and one would expect that before the hiring of Ms. Thomas, the necessary research ought to have been done. And this high level of commendation, And the minister have said that there is no issue with, to my understanding, her technicalities and her competence, right? As I see, there are more questions than answers, because in the Senate.
And I'm just wondering, sorry to cut your train of thought. Interpersonal savvy as the basis for dismissing someone. I mean, I'm just trying to understand how that adds up. If you're doing your job, if you're performing the task as you're expected to perform, how then does whether or not I like you come into the equation?
But there's something else that you have not mentioned, although you played it, and I would like probably for you to replay it at some stage, Eunice. There's another reason advanced that she was not fitting in, I think, with the agenda or something. So I may be using the wrong word, using the wrong word. And, there's rumors outside there that those in the corporate world also may not have been satisfied with a methodical approach to addressing industrial relations issues. And I'm saying, because these comments made by the minister have given rise to more questions than answers, right? You are hearing a number of issues being raised. And it would be interesting for you to replay some of the broader comments or additional comments, observations made by the minister. Because the question of fitting in just did not appear to be within the department, but within the broader overall objective. Yes? So it gives more rise for questions. But one would expect certainly that Ms. Thomas, who, as I've said, came at the highest level of recommendation, right? Apart from the fact that her being the first female labor commissioner, right? It must give rise to concerns about what appears to be that sudden termination, right? So that's all I'll say. But there are some things I'd like to develop in terms of the role of the labor commissioner as we go along, right? Important because it is a creature of statute. And that is why there will be concerns within, I will say, the industrial climate, because I would also expect that progressive employers would also wish to see someone who holds that position to be highly technical and competent in delivering what we call industrial relations practices.
And let me bring in Mr. Richardson. Now, Mr. Richardson, I'm not sure that your union has had the opportunity to interact with the labor commissioner. All seems to be peaceful on your front. Did you have a chance as a union? Did you meet with the labor commissioner? At any point? Of course, not over industrial dispute matters, but as a matter of introduction to the new labor commissioner.
Brother Kellon.
Yes.
Brother Kellon, no, but as Brother Andre rightly said, she came highly recommended. And again, I must say, the government has a right to hire and fire. And I will leave that there because PWU, that's her union, and they can take up, if there is any, what I would say, dismissal that is unfair, the PWU, I know, would fight for the cause of their member. And so we too, as trade unionists, we would want to know that persons' rights are honored. So justice must take its course.
Absolutely. Okay, and of course, we're trying to tee up that clip that Mr. Lewis spoke about, because we do want to hear that in its proper context. But Mr. Richardson, in respect of other labor issues in your union, you're planning to contest the role of second vice president of the Grenada Union of Teachers. Why now?
Good morning.
Outside
again,
of the
Dr.
fact that
Bob.
there might be a vacancy. Yes, good morning, sir.
Yes, right now, because I bring to the table quite some years of experience. I have been in the labor movement for over 33 years. I have served different presidents in the GUT. I have worked my way up the trenches. I have been chairman of the Shop Steward Council for over 8 years. I am currently the health and safety officer. And in our last struggle, the pension struggle, I would have fought tooth and nail together with Brother Jude Bartholomew, our leader, and we have bring home what I would say success for all in the working force, not only teachers. So I am happy that I could continue to walk along with Brother Jude again in this era, but also to note that the second vice president is responsible for all the different organs of the GUT, the women's arm, the youth arm, the shop steward council, education and research. And I'm thinking that right now I am poised with the skill set that I have so that I will be able to walk along with these communities, because I'm running this on two principles. One, institutional strengthening of the GUT, and capacity building for members. We are in an era of cutting technology, cutting edge of technology, and teachers need to retool themselves so that they will be able to deliver better services to the children and also to the community. In addition to that, I am thinking that a 108-year-old organization as the GUT, we should have a debate among persons offering themselves for service so that we will be able to hear what they want to do, where they want to take the Grenada Union of Teachers to in this era. So these are two principles that I am running on, and definitely if given the opportunity to serve at that higher level, I would be able to implement those things.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about capacity building. Where do you see weaknesses right now in the union that need strengthening in respect of its organization?
Well, I would not say weaknesses, but areas for improvement. Succession planning, we need to do so that persons, when I say a debate among leaders, persons offering up themselves, if we have that debate, you will be able to know there is an alternative so that person's vision, if it fits your way, then you will be able to buy into the vision, and therefore that in itself would help in succession planning and capacity building, growing of leaders, so that persons would be able to take up the mantle when the needs arise.
Mm-hmm. And succession planning, and that is a very important point that you raised there, ensuring that the next generation of that there is a next generation of leaders within the GUT. Are you seeing a heightened interest by members? I mean, I come from an era in the labor movement in Grenada, because I was a proud member of the Technical and Allied Workers Union, when we were not afraid to struggle for our rights. Are we seeing a chilling of that kind of militancy and solidarity that we saw before, or is it still continuing, or are we seeing a chilling of
I think what is happening when I talk about institutional strengthening?
Yes.
Yes, persons need to know the Constitution of Grenada. They need to know the labor laws. They need to know even the Constitution of Grenada itself. But our organization is poised because we have the youth arm. The youth arm is the arm of the trade union organization that from there you will be able to see, mold, and grow leaders as the time comes. Now, I being the second vice president, this falls right under my ambit. So then I would be able to have programs put in place so that we can have this capacity building so that persons would be able to take up leadership roles. In addition to that, Brother Kellon, Dr. Bob, I think that we need to have teachers retooling themselves so that they would be able to, teachers don't actually get overtime, but if teachers retool themselves with different skill set, they would be able to, at the same time, provide better training for the students and they can use this different skill set in the community in which they live so that they can gain additional income. For example, tailoring, seamstress, cake decoration, and electrical installation, all these things. If teachers retool themselves, they will be better able for the market and also to help the students. We as a profession also have to look in terms of ethics. Our young teachers need to, know about the ethics of the teaching profession, how they would be able to conduct themselves properly, both in school and out of school. So these are some of the things that we need to take into consideration so that we'll have a more vibrant, what I would say, teaching profession. In addition to that, you said that you were in the movement with Tau.
Correct.
I remember myself just about, let's say, 1 month in the teaching profession. I was at the York House pulling barbed wire with Sister Clarice Charles. So that's where my trade unionism came from, that kind of era. So
yeah, I am from the era when Comrade Chester Humphrey was still the president of the union, and I do remember vividly that occasion when the police confronted him on the carnage during the GBN struggle, and they attempted to arrest people like Comrade Lewis and so on, who had the loud hailer at the time, challenging them to arrest Comrade Chester. So thank you for that context. But I want to get back to the clip, and Comrade Lewis, I have the clip. I'm going to play that clip now, and we will talk about it.
Upon review of the state of the relationship as requested by the Public Service Commission, it was decided by the Commission and the Ministry that it will be best for us to go back to the drawing board with in our search for a labor commissioner that fits with the personnel and also with our general outlook as we seek to take steps to enhance the labor climate in Grenada for workers, for employers, and specifically for the members of staff at the Labor Ministry who are delivering on the services to our stakeholders.
Senator Lewis, and before I get you to respond to that, now folks were questioning the highly recommended piece there, and I'm going to quote from an article that was published in the Grenadian Voice that quotes the government of Grenada, that quotes the current government of Grenada, not the previous NNP administration. And this is what the article says. It says the Ministry of Legal Affairs, Labor and Consumer Affairs, in announcing the appointment via press release, noted that Thomas brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to the position. That is a direct quote from the Ministry of Labor. They are the ones who suggested that this candidate came in highly recommended after reviewing a series of very competitive applications for that role. Mr. Lewis, over to you. I want you to respond to that.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Bubb. But it is also instructive to note, based on the information that is outside there, that Ms. Thomas did not come to Grenada looking for a work. She did not make an application seeking for work. But based on contacts and officials within the government, based on their knowledge of her level of competency, they basically sought her out. So it was not a case where, based on my understanding, that was publicly said that she came looking for work. And therefore that begs to question why the sudden apparent fallout. And in the clip that you played, there were about 3 issues raised: the issue of personnel relationship, and then the tag on about the climate or so within the department. But what is of key importance to us in the labor movement, and myself in particular, is a point which said that she did not fit in with a general outlook to enhance the labor climate. In other words, so this year, after 3.5 months, you are in a position where you are saying she has not fitted in well with the program of the general outlook to enhance labor climate. And therefore, one is forced to give considerations to what are the issues that the labor commissioner had before her during that period of time. And certainly, the port authority matter will stand out. Certainly, I got a call from the leader of one of our trade unions on Friday morning after hearing about this development, who was astounded, right? Who basically couldn't understand what was happening, because for a very long time, after visiting the Ministry of Labor and the very methodical manner in which the Labor Commissioner addressed the issues, right? He was taken aback to learn that she's terminated, right? And those reasons advance. So it raises more questions than answers. And certainly for us in the labor movement, and TAU in particular, we have picked up that there may have been concerns, right, expressed by certain members of the corporate world, yes, certain businesses, right? And I said, that appears to fit in, because in the absence of broadened discussions and the fact that we are a discerning population, I want you to pay particular attention to one of the reasons advanced as she did not fit in well with the general outlook to enhance the labor climate in terms of labor and employers, right? And within 3.5 months. So that must give rise as to how did she handle the matters that came before her. But it is important, Dr. Bubb, because I know time normally runs quick.
Yes.
I want to, with your permission, highlight what the Employment Act 14 addresses about the Labor Commissioner. Because on part 2, establishment and function of the Department of Labor, I'm going to offices of the Department of Labor, section 7. It says 1, there shall be a labor commissioner, a deputy labor commissioner, and such number of senior labor officers and labor officers as may be necessary. 2, there shall be other consultants, advisors, officers, and clerks in the Department of Labor as may be necessary. But listen in particular to number 3. It says, the deputy labor commissioner, the senior labor officers, and the other officers and clerks shall perform such duties as may be assigned to them by the labor commissioner. And therefore, it means that the labor commissioner has direct charge of the Ministry of Labor, subject to section 6.1 in terms of directives from the Minister for Labor. It says here, then if we go to section 8, and I'm doing this so that listeners can acquaint themselves with the labor code because of the important role of the Labor Commission. And that is why for us in TAU, in particular in the general labor movement, many times we are not overly concerned about the result that comes from the Ministry of Labor. What we are concerned about is the process that has been used. Once it appears to be fair, once you can see the methodology that have been used, right? Those things are important. And once matters are heard, right, without much delay. It says subject to section 6, and section 6 has to do with the powers of the minister. The labor commissioner shall be the chief advisor. Listen to this. The labor commissioner shall be the chief advisor to the minister on all labor matters and shall be responsible for the administration of the Department of Labor and the enforcement of this act, and in particular shall, and there are eight functions identified, right, from A to G. One of them, promote the settlement of any differences between employers and employees in accordance with the provision of this act. That's A. G says, make recommendations to the minister for the promotion of good industrial relations practices. And so that's an important function. That is a whole important function. And therefore, I am sure for the listening public, not just in labor, because remember, for us in organized labor, we are better able to represent our members, Many times you end up at the Ministry of Labor is when matters, all depends on the matter, it is resolved on the streets. So our concern is not just about organized labor, because at least there's a mechanism in place that we can help address industrial relations matters. But what's about the non-unionized workplaces? What's about the workplaces where there ain't any union represented? So, and therefore this action on the face of it, and certainly in keeping with some of the arguments advanced by the minister, must cause uncertainty on the labor front.
Absolutely. Mr. Lewis, thank you for that. But of course, there are other labor issues that, of course, that resonate with both unions here. One has to do with the regularization of temporary teachers there. I know that your president, Mr. Richardson, Comrade Jude, Teacher Jude, articulated concerns over that issue, the regularization of those temporary teachers. And we also have now on the table conversations around pension reform. Of course, I know that the government made commitments around establishing a pension review committee. So we want to start there. What conversations have your unions been having with government around that? Mr. Richardson, I will start with you. Have you been invited to serve on any pension review committee as yet?
Not to my knowledge, Dr. Bob.
Okay.
But I think we are in the preparatory stage where we are getting ourselves together so that whenever the opportunity arises, we would be fully able to state our case.
Okay.
On such matters.
Very well. Mr. Senator Lewis? Same question.
Certainly,
on
as
pension
you're
reform.
aware, the government have invited the TUC. We have raised certain concerns because there is a court judgment, and we want to make sure, given the years of battle, see, this is not pre-court judgment. This is post-court judgment. And therefore, there are legal implications that we need to be guided by our legal advisors on. And what was clearly stated was the aspect that we are governed by and guided by the ruling of the court, right? So that's, but Dr. Bob, just permit me, even if it is just the last point, it would be interesting to verify. As I said, I expect Ms. Thomas to pursue this matter legally, whether or not it was the Public Service Commission that requested that review. And if they requested that review, someone must have triggered the request for that review.
And that is a question that I had. That was a question that was not answered.
You know, in other words, you see, these are reason doors, because remember, what we do when we are not directly involved in matters is to be able to analyze issues and to be able to line up the ducks. Yes? So these things are early days, but one is looking to see, yes.
No, absolutely. So pension reform first. What proposals are you going to be bringing to the table? Again, you said it has to be grounded in law, but of course, as we would appreciate, as the government said, as the previous government also said, there is consistency there, that there needs to, going forward, be proper pension reform in Grenada if we are to sustain the current non-contributory pension scheme that we have.
What I do know that even in the private sector, we have Yes, we have major companies where workers do not contribute to their pension. Well, let me say they contribute because by your employment engagement, you contribute because the public officer is contributing to the revenue of the country. And even in the private sector, the worker is contributing. So part of what may have been part of your, let us say, your basic wages, one of the considerations in negotiations will be those factors that one will be taken into account. So it is not wholly correct to say that it is non-contributory from the fact that there isn't a standing deduction from your salary. But once you are employed with an employer, you are contributing to the revenues generated. And the formulation of your wages and other benefits, certainly on the negotiating table, these will be factors that will and may influence your final salaries. So it is not just to say that it is non-contributory, technically yes, in the context that there isn't a standing deduction from your salary, but one is contributing to the revenue and the performance of your employer. And therefore, in that broader context, because they're all interrelated, that broader context, you are contributing. Because remember, it is from the coffers of the employer, both in the public and private sector, where there are non-contributory schemes, right? Okay. That these contributions are made. But as I've indicated, certainly know that we are in the post court ruling, and we are always open to discussions, but we have certain guidelines that will certainly heavily influence the way forward.
Absolutely. And let's get to some viewer comments. We would begin with Cassandra Mitchell. She's asking, Senator Lewis, can you speak to Section 88 of the Public Service Rules and Regulations, which outlines proceedings for dismissal?
No, I cannot, because I am not fully on top of, but I would expect that given the experience of Ms. Thomas, because she's schooled in industrial relations, having been trained by the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. And this is the very basis on which the government was so highly in praise of her. I would expect that all of these matters would be looked at, and whichever legal team that she puts together will look at those matters. But certainly there will be procedures for firing. And I know that an employer, just as the government, have a right to hire and fire, but there are procedures and processes to be followed, and one cannot or ought not to be dismissed without cause. Yes,
and there are due process considerations as well before firing.
And that is linked, and that is linked also to not a controversial issue in my view. They have made it controversial, the issue in Karakou that we have spoken about from day one, right? This apparent power, right, which says that because I'm in charge, I can just terminate you when I want, right? And without taking into account the consequences. And probably that is why in the private sector, probably there might be many times a more measured approach to certain dismissal, because the consequences may impact on the private shareholders more than in the public sector, where the government pays, as past administrations have found themselves paying workers that they have dismissed without due process, and that money didn't come directly from their pocket, right? So Sister Cassandra Mitchell, who has always demonstrated an interest in these matters and broader national issues, if it is the same person, and I think it is, I am not entirely on top of this matter. I did not research this matter, but I can look into it, and I am sure that once this matter is taken up by Ms. Thomas, these factors will come into play. But in the public service, there are issues to be followed. And let me just say, just quickly, because I see this comment, I heard the minister, and you may not have played it. There's something that is not adding up to me. The final question during the press conference was asked, what was the time frame of the contract? And was there a probationary period? And the minister said that the contract was intended to be for X or Y time. Intended, right? I know that word intended, but more so.
Yes.
But more so. Dr. Bob, you see, and that's what we do in TAU and the labor movement. And that is why when we go before those third parties,
I picked up on that as well. I picked up on that as well. Yeah.
Like Ms. Thomas and anyone who is objective, right? We are thoroughly prepared. So I'll point it another one to you. I have never come across any contract for a specified period that have a probationary period. In other words, probationary period seeks to speak about looking at what you call permanency. But more than that, with the high level of recommendation and the fanfare that came with Ms. Thomas's hiring, it is difficult for me to swallow, yes, that she would have been put through the normal industrial hiring of a probationary period of 2 to 3 months or 3 to 6 months, right? So as I said, these comments have given rise to more questions than answers, and certainly, if our concerns have merit in it, it will certainly factor on whatever issues that her legal team and herself takes up.
Absolutely. Comrade Lewis, we quickly have to get to the next segment, but I certainly want to give both of you an opportunity for closing comments. But I want to begin with Comrade Richardson for some closing comments. All the very best to you, sir, on your election. Certainly, we would want to invite you back here. Now I have another expert I can turn to. Whenever labor issues arise, you seem to be very in reading your resume for campaigning for this, you seem to come very prepared with a wealth of knowledge, with a wealth of experience. I'm just going to look up, find the flyer here. Your points of strength: you're reliable, hardworking, competent, honest, trustworthy. You are a team player. You served as 8 years as a shop steward chair, and you were also chair of the Union Health and Safety sub-organization. You've been in every struggle from 1989 to the last pension struggle, and you have 33 years of trade union knowledge. So you come very highly qualified and highly recommended. And certainly, if the union is to be looking to its future, I would say that the future looks good under people like yourself. This is not an endorsement. Your opponent, they're also welcome on the Bubb Report to make their case as well. But over to you, Mr. Richardson.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Bob. I must say that what I am appealing on the 8th of March, which is International Women's Day, I would like to say happy International Day to all the teaching women and all the women of Grenada. But also I am appealing to the women to vote Honest Richardson, because he has been there in the struggle from since 1989 to present. I have been not only chair of the Shop Steward Council for 8 years. Currently, I am the chief trustee of the Grenada Union of Teachers. We have developed a soft loan so that teachers can tap into. And I am also trying to develop, one of my future plans is developing a 401k like in America, so that in your years of retirement, you would be able to have something else to live a comfortable life. So you always have to look for ways in which you can do something that would develop teachers and, take care of them. So to my worthy opponents, that's Brother Tommy Duncan and Brother Ian Bess, I say all the best to you come the 8th of March. And whoever wins, we would all have to work together for the continued development and advancement of the Grenada Union of Teachers.
Comrade Richardson, thank you so much and all the very best. And thank you for your services to education in Grenada. I believe that educators and people who work in the vineyard of the public service should be given their flowers now, not on top of a grave. So you deserve your flowers now as well.
Thank you very much. And to all the other persons who are running in that election, I wish them all the best. And may God, continue to strengthen the Grenada Union of Teachers. Brother Jude, unopposed, Brother Marshall, we would work together to develop the Grenada Union of Teachers. Brother Andre, we'll continue to work with you so that we would be able to do what's best for trade unionism in Grenada. So once again, Dr. Bob, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. And we would look forward to working together to just develop the working class.
Absolutely. And Senator Lewis, over to you for some closing comments, sir.
Well, thanks. I can't help but as Comrade Otis spoke about working together. We have been in the trenches together many years. And he has been a fearless fighter. And this is not about endorsing or not endorsing. I mean, he's here. He's absolutely fearless. Yes, he's absolutely fearless. He confronts the issues, and the survival of the labor movement and the history of the labor movement has been rooted and must continue to be rooted in that ability to fight battles on the street. Because that's all we have is our labor power. And as the institutions are stacked many times against us, if we give up that yearning and that fearlessness to confront the issues on the street, yes, the labor movement and the working class will find itself at the back foot. Comrade Bubb, as I move forward in terms of the industrial climate, as I wrap up, certainly as we started on the question of the labor commissioner and what it appears to do, the uncertainty that it will create at the moment, I look forward to this matter being resolved, but I can't help but address a matter that will also fit in with this. The TUC at some stage will have to probably, come out even more public on the question of NIS. NIS is a tripartite arrangement, and the PRG ensured that in order for it to be able to be, for it to continue operating in the objective manner that it has done, is to have labor, private sector, and government representing in its own deliberate judgment and selections of individuals from these bodies in their own deliberate judgment to serve on the different committees. I need to bring to the attention of the public that the investment committee under this current administration the TUC has been denied our representative. We have been trying to get this matter resolved, and it's the first time since the formation of the NIS back in 1983 that this has ever happened. We have written to the minister, we have been trying to hold meetings, and for some reason, this matter is not being addressed, right? So the investment committee is extremely important because the investment committee is a committee that will vet any investment that the NS is looking to go into. And in our view in the labor movement and in the private sector, the investment committee played a critical role in keeping the NIS afloat and preventing it from going into investments that may have resulted into further problems for the NIS. And one of the most recent vintage had to do with when the government wanted to take the haircut in NIS. Right? So this present administration, I'm making this appeal in the interest of continued good industrial relations nationally, that the government move to immediately and speedily rectify this matter by allowing the TUC, in keeping with the law, I dare say, in keeping with the law, to have our representative nominated to serve on the investment committee. Because if anything were to go wrong with NIS, we will not take responsibility. But at the end of the day, it is the workers that will suffer. There is no need for us to be going through this. We have seen a particular pattern in gravel and concrete. National Lotteries Association, that's TAU specific now. It's all part of the labor movement. And I'm specifically addressing the NIS because the workers of this country who has been contributing to the NIS do not have any representation on the NIS investment committee. We have written to the respective minister. We have raised it at the highest level, right? Some may say that we have taken too long to address this matter forcefully, but one wants to give everything an opportunity, a chance to be resolved peacefully. So I'm using this opportunity to bring it to the attention of the general public and hoping that through this medium, we will receive a letter from the government, right, asking us for a nominee, because this committee was reconstituted without the input of the TUC. And the tradition, the law requires tripartite arrangement on the NS, and there's reason for that. You have employers, that's the private sector, you have workers, the labor movement, and you have government, right? But for the like of us, I do not wish to read into it at the moment. We have our reasons, we have our concerns, but I will not wish to make this our thought process public, because we want to use this first opportunity to as a second phase, to call publicly so that the government will take the necessary step to have this matter addressed urgently. Having said that, I wanted to put that there, right? We look forward to this matter being addressed, and we look forward to the development of good industrial relations practices. We are in a period where there are a number of changes, and obviously there'll be different contentions, but we are quite comfortable that we have the wherewithal, that's in terms of the private sector, the labor movement, and government, to be able, and the NGOs, in a non-confrontational manner to address issues, right? But we will continue.
Quickly before, I have a follow-up question to the investment committee. When was the new investment committee constituted?
Sometimes, well, we wrote, when we recognized what was happening, we wrote the government in September, October. I'm looking at the correspondence here. It was sometime at the end of September, but I'm leaving at 2 days or a week as to when it may have been sent. But certainly, we wrote at the end of September into October, so which means that it was reconstituted sometime in September, either August or September thereabouts, but probably as late as September, and we are now in March, right? So one can take that into account. We are on the other committees. So for instance, we are on the NIS Board of Directors. We are on the NIS Appeals Board, but on this investment committee, a crucial committee, I dare say, they are all crucial, but an extremely crucial committee, right? As this, it is quite apparent there is an unwillingness on the part of the government to have labor involved. And that's against the law. But even apart from being against the law.
Do you know who else is on that committee?
Well, the private sector and government. I mean, what I do know is that the person who have traditionally represented us, and we have not changed that individual in years, come with the highest level of commendation. Someone who was a leader in the business sector, in the private sector. So we do not just put people on committees.
And who is that? Who is that person? Who is that person?
Well, the person that we had nominated, and we had no reason to change that person, would be Mr. Roy O'Neill.
Roy O'Neill,
yes?
Okay, all right.
Right. And he has the highest level of commendation. And the TUC never took any decision to change him, right? Although we will have to make that decision, but given our history and our confidence in him. So it is a matter of serious concern for us. As I've said, we have tried to resolve the matter in the background. We have been writing for meetings to engage. But there's no need for a discussion. What we need to get right now is that correspondence that asks us for a nominee so that we can urgently submit our nominee, because I'm saying that in the event that there is any investment that has been approved by that investment committee, right, it will not have the blessings of the TUC because we are not part and parcel of that. And if anything was to go wrong, it can lead to further national industrial disputes because we have to guard very jealously, right, our funds at the NIS. And that is why, Dr. Bubb, the TUC agreed to the increase in the NIS age, because we reckon even if our approach is to see left up to us as workers' representative, we would like to see the retirement age reduced so that people can go home earlier, and live a nice life.
And enjoy a good retirement.
Enjoy a good,
absolutely.
But there are certain realities that we have. And we have demonstrated and continue to demonstrate our level of maturity in handling this matter. And therefore, they like of us. That is why we cannot understand. We have our thought processes. As to why the government has not yet rectified that matter. And I'm saying from a union specific now, in terms of TAU, we have concerns about at the level of gravel and concrete and of Lotto. And we are calling on the government to look into these matters. They know what our concerns are, but I'm putting it outside there because many times people tend to think that TAU just get up and go on the street. But we will not shy away from what we have to do. So I'm using this medium to bring it to the attention of the government through this medium, although it was done professionally, right? In terms of correspondence, these matters that we are raising. So I'm using this opportunity, grateful for this platform. As we want to wish all our sisters happy International Women's Day, as we also head into another March 13th 44th anniversary celebrations. March 13th, which is 2 Mondays away from now.
Yeah.
There's a March 13th celebrations committee that will be having an activity on the 11th of, I'm just taking that liberty. I'm giving understanding a background.
Please
Thank
do,
you very much. On March 11th at 5:30, long live. There will be, there is a celebrations in which there will be a discussion involving Dr. Tessa Barry, involving Dr. Sister Val Cornwall, and Dr. Brian Mix. The information will be sent out. It has already started to go out, so the platforms they will be sent out. So I'm just bringing to the attention. I'm asking people to join on. It's a virtual engagement on March the 11th, which will mark the celebrations, virtual celebrations of the 44th anniversary as we prepare for the 45th. And on the 11th, on the 12th of March, it's not really a public activity, but just to big up the XPRA and Patriots Welfare Association that will be in progress back with our soldiers and our revolutionary and patriots, etc. For a day of social, right? Just to reminisce and bring comrades together, right? So we are in a very important period as we prepare for the 45th anniversary of the Grenada Revolution and the 50th anniversary of our independence, and therefore it would be nice to have that linkage made, right? My view, right? 45 into 50 come 2024.
Absolutely. Comrade Lewis and Comrade Richardson, thank you both for appearing on the Bubb Report this week. Viewers and listeners, what we want to do now is to take our final break of the day, and we will bring in Brother William Joseph. William, unfortunately, your sparring partner isn't here today, so we might have to have the three-course meal all by ourselves. I hope you have the appetite.
Wow, that's a lot for me to chew on.
That would be a lot for you to chew on, my friend, Mr. Joseph. So let us take a quick break, viewers and listeners, and we'll be right back to be joined by Mr. William Joseph. Hi, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Bubb Report's social media pages. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch our weekly live show, follow our Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram pages, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can catch repeat episodes on Wednesdays at 4 and 5 p.m. respectively on CRFM Radio and GBN TV in Grenada. We are also viewed on Sundays at 8 p.m. on WPG10 throughout the Caribbean. Thanks for watching. And welcome back, viewers and listeners. Now, for our final segment of the day, we're going to have a conversation with Mr. William Joseph around today's National Democratic Congress convention. It's the first in-person convention of the political party. It's the second since election, and it's the second since the election of Deacon Mitchell as the political leader of the National Democratic Congress. So, Willie, we want to get into it with you. Is the National Democratic Congress 3.0, and 3.0, I contextualize it in the fact that 3.0 is the third time that the NDC has now earned state power by virtue of the people's vote. Is the new look NDC that we're seeing, are they a complete break from the previous NDC administrations? Now, one of the things that challenged the previous NDC administrations was their inability to maintain an effective party machinery while they governed. Do you think that they would be able to break that curse under this iteration?
Well, thank you again, Professor, and good morning to all your listeners. You know, you would normally allow me the opportunity to set my bib. And
yeah, well, absolutely.
I want to do so. But before I do, I just want to commend you and the contributors in the first, well, Paolo and also trade union team, really high level of discourse. Now, regarding the Carnival matter, you recall that after our Carnival here in Grenada, you hosted a program in which a number of us shared our views regarding the future of Grenada's Carnival.
Yes.
And we are 4 or 2 months away from Carnival, and I don't know that there's anything in place, certainly that I have heard of, to address the issue, that specific issue. What are we going to be doing about Carnival in the context of a desirable future, and also in the context of the problems and issues that arose last time? So perhaps we need to knock the doors of the regime again on this issue. And my brother, President Lewis,
yes.
I dare not abuse the privilege of this platform. But I must say to him and to others that, listen, if you claim March 13th, and you ought to, all of us ought to, right? We have to claim October 19th. We can't claim March 13th and disown October 19th. So let's address that I hopefully when the time comes. Okay, so that aside. Now, the convention of the NDC that's going on today, as you've noticed, the first since they formed the government in June the last time. And because the party is in office, there is going to be a degree of public interest in the event. Conventions, the party conventions are typically private to themselves, the delegates and so on, members of the party, but the public has a fair and reasonable interest in what comes out of that. Remember, the mission of the party, it really is to form the government of Grenada. And when your party is in office, the mission becomes how do we retain being the government of Grenada? How do we retain that? And that is work for both the government itself as cabinet and for the party. So it's very, very important that we do that. The third thing is that there is some history for us to recognize. When your party is in office, what you do at the level of the party would generally have implications for the government that the party has in fact constituted with through the popular vote. We saw it with the NJM PRG. The PRG didn't go down because of problems in running the government. It went down because there were issues in the party that owned the government called the PRG. Second example, the NDC of 2008 to 2013. What broke that regime was a problem at the level of the party that then spilled over and consumed the government itself. So the last point I would make is that the theme that the party has publicized is something that we should pay attention to. In a way, the question you pose at the top seeks to draw out this thing. Is this theme really relevant? Is it the correct thing, given the positioning that we're aware of, or the party to be addressing some other matters before it begins to or purports to deal with this issue of transforming party? So I just wanted to lay those things on the table, and I'd be pleased if you would restart with the question at the top.
Absolutely. So now we're going to now that we have the appetizer down, we're going to look at the entrees now. Yes. Yeah. And you spoke about those issues. Of course, there were growing palace intrigue with the Peter David at the time that Mr. David was in the party. During that era, conflicts around leadership and all of that. What do you think this current leader, political leader, Deacon Mitchell, would learn from that history in respect of ensuring that he can galvanize and coalesce his party under a unity banner such that these fissures do not erupt again?
Right. So I think there might be a long answer to that question.
Yeah.
Beginning with the state of affairs of the NDC at the time that Deacon Mitchell entered and provided leadership to that organization. Clearly, all of us know it was not in a very buoyant condition. It was a party that, of course, was entitled to and continued to enjoy a level of popular support, but its leadership really was not appealing to the vast majority of the population, citizens and voters. And that is why once they had remedied the leader problem, one saw the fortunes of the party mount and escalate in very quick time. So here's my point. Now, specific action is needed, in my view, on the part of the new leader of the NDC to build, essentially to rebuild the NDC. Now, what is the priority? political parties in the modern era are associated with and define themselves in terms of brand. We've discussed this before. The NNP is a provider brand in Grenadian politics, the hand of supply, and that's why one saw so many millions going to what they've called and popularized as the poor and vulnerable. It's a provider brand. Leave out for the time being the corruption and so on and so on. That is the essence of the brand. The NDC today needs a brand positioning that is relevant to the Grenadian marketplace. Given the demographic changes, given interests and so on, the developments and so on that have taken place among different sections and classes of the population, what ought that branding to be? So I think really that is how the new leader would in my view, begin to make a mark that counts. Solid programs on the ground, beginning with the branding of the party at this time, and then progressing towards the question of the appropriateness of the structures and systems, and very, very critically, the capacity, the human capacity available to the party to get its work done. Listen, I think people who pay attention would know that in the era in which we live, a political party without an engine room, meaning to say a group of thinkers that are competent, is not going to get very far. Your victory might appear to be a flash in the pan. And then after that, what? So that's a second thing that the new leader, so branding, in my view, and the question of the building of capacity beyond officers of the party. Listen, if you paid attention to the last campaign, as I did, I dare say that, a lot of the party people and so on might have, contributed to some tactical stuff. But a lot of the strategic thinking that supported the effort of the NDC came from elsewhere. So I'm saying that capacity needs to be available in a structured relationship with the NDC in this period and going forward. And so I find this talk about transforming party to be very, it doesn't stir me. I find this kind of glib stuff. To me, you ain't reached there yet, right? Let's build and try and consolidate something, have a brand that people could identify with, equip yourself with personnel who can make a difference in your strategy building and so on. And let's see some strength there, and the relationship between party and government, because we made the point in the preamble that when your party is in office, what you do at the level of the party, certainly at senior levels, could mess up your whole administration, because people are paying attention. It is the same set of people. The political leader of the NDC is also the prime minister. So if we see sloppiness and so on coming through the NDC convention, he's going to send a message regarding the NDC as government. I'm just using that as an analogy to make the point. Okay?
Absolutely. Let us talk about the current position. Of course, one of the positions that might be open for contesting is the role of General Secretary. Of course, we know in any political organization that the General Secretary is the engine room, if you will, of the party. We're hearing that the MIT minister might be challenging the current General Secretary. Do you believe that someone such as him, given his active role as a government minister, having such an important ministry, would serve well to have him as the General Secretary?
Well, I don't know that I am able to pronounce judgment in a direct way, consistent with the way in which you frame the question. But broadly, the role of the General Secretary, and especially in a context where the party is seeking to establish itself in the marketplace, in 2023 because it had sagged and lagged behind for about 4 or 5 or 7 years before that.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a bundle of tasks that would need to be done in this period and spearheaded primarily by the General Secretary. So clearly, one is talking about a person, whoever that is, with some organizational capacity, some discipline, somebody who reads, somebody who is studying the political landscape in Grenada at a very, very serious level, or a person who understands the need to access that kind of intelligence and to be guided by it. In other words, if you don't have it yourself, because we live in an age of systems and teams, if you don't have it yourself, but you understand the value of the thing, then you seek to get it from those who have it. And then when you have it in hand, you utilize it correctly for the benefit of the organization. So I think that kind of broad-mindedness, if a person is seeking to be General Secretary and would say to himself or herself, well, I have everything, I know everything and so on, I am popular, I am this, I am that, I talk a lot, really, you're really making my wet. You're wrong. You're wrong. And one of the reasons why you're wrong, let me just fast forward this thing a little bit. You see, the NDC as a party, in my view, I've argued this elsewhere, and I don't know that they've done it. I think they needed, after the victory of June last year, to have sat down to understand who voted the NDC and why. Who voted the NDC? Who from this?
Well, you are assuming that they might not have done that. How do you know that they have not had that?
No. I'm saying that's what I'm saying. I say I don't. Yeah. I am not aware that it has been done.
Right.
But it is so important that it be done. Mm-hmm. That in the event that they have not yet done it, then they ought to do it. Mm-hmm. Because you see, when you know the who and the why, then that begins to condition your decision making. How am I fulfilling the expectations of these people? One of the things that we've argued in the past is that a significant section of NDC support last time came from young people. But we also have said that a lot of these young people didn't really care about party.
Or ideology. It struck me, for example, that the MP for St. George Northeast made that point. He said that we are not interested in ideology. We are interested in what can you deliver on behalf of the issues that young people are confronting in the country.
You see, there was a pairing. Remember, we live in a very selfie culture. And
social media driven culture.
Yeah, they cut this thing, and it's one of the influences in the Carnival that Paolo talked about without using that phrase. Mm-hmm. But he was bang on target. There is something in that selfie culture that is operating on our commercial appetite. It's operating on our spending and consumption patterns. It's operating on our political interests. Mm-hmm. You see, so there is nothing. It's not very deep. It's not very deep, and that's why I described it as a pairing with a leader. No. Can one rely on that going forward, or ought one to seek to consolidate that thing on different grounds? And that is why this question of building the NDC as a brand, a political brand that is relevant to the political marketplace in Grenada, is so very important at this time.
Mm-hmm. And what we want to do, Mr. Joseph, we've completed our entree really quickly. What we want to do, of course, is to take a quick break. When we come back, before we have you get to some closing comments, we want to talk about, of course, what's happening on the other side. Now, we have some comments here, some very unfortunate comments, I would say, that everybody's talking about, well, why NDC? For example, a viewer here is saying that why are we not talking about why NNP is not having a convention? Well, we actually have those conversations as well. We can walk and chew gum at the same time. We can have multiple conversations at the same time. There is this idea that you know, anytime conversations around NDC comes up, well, we bring up the other side. That is not how we engage in intellectual and critical discourse as a society. If that is the case, then we should not be having any critical discourse at all. That's all I'm going to say on this matter. But let us
but please,
go back.
Please,
go ahead, Mr. Joseph. Yes.
Please, let me put a footnote to that.
Please.
Because I am one of
yes.
those who people associate with advocating for the NDC and so on for many, many years, and especially in the last elections. And I would say to people who voice those views, remember, the NDC hardcore cannot deliver victory to the party. Listen to me. You cannot by yourselves deliver. We cannot by ourselves. I'm not a member, but I support the NDC. We cannot by ourselves deliver victory to the NDC. Therefore, we must be broad-minded and mature enough. If we can't shift our thinking at the level of the self, how can we be talking about transformation? Listen, transformation begins with the self. The thinking, what do I believe in? What is good for, not just for me, but for the greater society? What is good? How do we establish a beautiful, what I call a beautiful government in Grenada? So we ought not to be trying to censor people because they don't, you know, they discuss NDC issues. That don't make much sense. Please, respectfully, I say that, and I encourage all people of that mind. I've seen it elsewhere. Please understand this thing in a much more responsible and less emotional manner. Thank you very much.
And that is what it's all about. We need to have, I don't know if we teach emotional intelligence in schools, but maybe we need to do that. And I would take it from my former teacher, Mr. Deacon Mitchell. He was my former teacher in school. He's a very emotionally intelligent man. And in my engagements with Mr. Deacon Mitchell, with all of the hard questions that I've posed to Mr. Deacon Mitchell, not once did Mr. Deacon Mitchell get aggrieved or angry or upset or take any line of questioning to him personally. I'm not too sure where we have gotten to this place where we're having a coarsening of the discourse. And what I would say, the difference between Mr. Deacon Mitchell and the former Prime Minister of Grenada, is that there were times when he took personal exception to lines of questioning. Not all the time. There are times when he laughed questions off and, he took it in just water off a duck's back. But in respect of the current leader of the NDC, I can't say that in any of my engagement with any of the leaders of the NDC, that it has been sort of, anytime they're asked tough questions, that it becomes an eye-rolling exercise. Well, why were you not asking NNP that?
See, that exposes something. And I'm so happy you've begun to open that box. The need for political education of supporters. People need to be educated on stuff. So my government is talking about transformation. What have they put for me to read? What is it have they put in my hands for me to read? Our struggle in this country begins with understanding. We must first understand what it is that's in our hands, and then have it sorted out in the mind so that we don't misdirect ourselves and back at the wrong this and that and the other. It is so very important, this whole process of bringing our followers, bringing our frontline people up to speed. If you want to be advocating for your party, educate yourself in some useful way on political thinking, political reasoning, so that you be of benefit to your party. Listen to me. Loyalty, party loyalty cannot develop country. Party loyalty will not take or cause the NDC in this case to retain office. It is not the loyalty of the handful. It's not that. If it were the loyalty of the handful, you would never win the elections. So please, let's talk about how we educate ourselves and then move with that platform, move on that understanding, to then interact in a more responsible and constructive manner.
Absolutely. And just as we get off the entree before we go to dessert, the Bubb Report in the first quarter of 2023 had on this platform Mr. Peter David, the Assistant General Secretary of the New National Party. We also had Ms. Delma Thomas, who is the Member of Parliament for St. Andrew Northwest of the New National Party. We on the Bubb Report raised issues around the leadership of the New National Party on both occasions with both people who represent their party. So the idea that no one is talking about what NNP is doing, at least I can speak to this platform, that is inaccurate. So let us take a quick break here. And Mr. Joseph, we're going to go down memory lane. This was back in 2002. And you would be very surprised by the revelation. Let us reveal what's behind this curtain. Politics took center stage during the year 2002. In January, opposition party, the National Democratic Congress, held a landmark convention at the St. Andrews Anglican Secondary School. A number of neo-revolutionaries from the People's Revolutionary Government, now defunct, mostly dominated the national executive. Tillman Thomas regained his leadership of the party, with George Prime elected as the deputy political leader.
Brothers and sisters, we must also challenge the NNP. For the last 2 years, since they won 15 seats in the parliament, they have been running around believing that they can do anything and get away with it. They believe that 15 seats in parliament meant that they can strangle our people and rape our country and empty the treasury. They believe that they do not have to answer to other people. But now they have to answer, because we have a revived and strong NDC who is willing to challenge them in every nook and cranny of Grenada. The NNP must be challenged.
After 7 years, Grenadians are now united in the view that the Mitchell administration has not only failed us miserably, but they continue to cause us severe embarrassment. Sisters and brothers, after considerable reflection, self-criticism, restructuring and rebuilding, listening to and consulting with the stakeholders of our society, we of the National Democratic Congress have committed ourselves to rescue Grenada. We have developed a draft plan for doing so, and we should take this opportunity to share with you some of the plans we intend to implement when we form the next government of Grenada.
The ruling New National Party was not far behind, as they too held their convention at the Grenada Trade Center in April, with their General Council being held in September at the St. John's Anglican School. I don't even recognize my voice. I was a young reporter at the time, but that was back in 2002. Again, that was an emergent NDC at the time, and it's amazing what history does. Yes, we have at that time Mr. David donning his yellow NDC. Now he's donning a green NDC. No, it's a green NNP T-shirt now. How times have changed.
Yeah, indeed. You know, I always remember I was out on a mission on behalf of my ministry at the time, and I was told by my wife then on the telephone that, you know, these guys are going to join the NDC, the former revolutionaries.
Yeah.
And my gut reaction was to say aloud, that can't work. That was my response. That can't work. And because I did not think at the time that Grenadians were interested in rewarding these guys with power after the contributions that it appeared that many of them made in terms of the demise of the revolution itself. But I saw something on my television the evening of the convention, I think the evening after, when it carried on the news, when I saw some good, solid Grenadian men and women hug and embrace these guys. And I was stunned. I was taken aback, and it forced me to think. And when I did so, what came to my mind is this: that in the culture in which we live, people always need leadership. And in the case of the NDC, after the beating, the trashing of 1999, where the party was left virtually headless, the NDC people could not care two hoots what it is that they were getting and so on. They were getting, apart from the fact that in their view, they were getting people to lead their party and to lead them. And that was it. There is something instinctive about this thing that we must bear in mind. You see, I'm going to touch on what transpired a little earlier. There's a kind of fighting mood in the NDC, among NDC people. I know it, I've been part of it. To want to fight off everything that appears to challenge the NDC. You see, because of what they experienced. So, when you came up with the problem in 2010, 2013, there were about with and so on and so on. NDC people have again to be fighting for their party. They fight because right, but because people weren't concerned about that, they were hell-bent on fighting for their party. It's an instinctive thing that's operating. So, as you say, a lot of water has flown under the bridge. You have guys and so on who came and were restored, in a manner of speaking, to Grenadian politics by the NDC faithful, who contributed to the rise of the NDC after 1999, and then some of whom decided by 2010 that they must take full control. So I caution this thing. Hearing talk about which faction want to take full control. If you want to do that, you run the risk of spoiling the entire thing for everybody. We saw that before in the history. Bear that in mind. Your party is in office. If you are reckless about stuff at the level of the party because you want to control, as Peter wanted to do that, right? You're going to have a problem. So, a word to the wise.
A word to the wise is enough. Let's hope that your advice is taken and folks do not feel that they have arrived now and they would not want to take the advice of elder statesmen like yourself. Any closing comments as we wrap up the dessert?
Yeah, well, I said at the top that when the ruling party has its convention, certainly the first since its election, the public is entitled to pay some attention to it. It is not just about the party. There are messages that come out to the public, and so therefore I am looking out for the resolutions that are passed at this convention, if there are any, and if they are, what scope, what matters do they address? Because now you see, you're talking about the stature. Your party is in government. There has to be a certain stature that must come with the party at this time. Okay, the cabinet is in full sway and so on. It's well populated, good people of talent. The party must show some quality. What is it? What are the documents that have been put to party members to read and study? What resolutions are they going to pass? Are they going to be interested in public education and political education and training of their people? Are they going to be interested in having access to good quality political expertise to help them to do the work that has to be done? And I do not define that work in terms of transformation at this stage. I think you're a far cry from that. And the sloganeering and so on is one thing. But if we deal with the substance that's closer to the reality, it's not about that. It's about how you strengthen, how you bring capacity to the party, and what brand you put on the marketplace for citizens to deal with. So that's my 2 pence on it.
And at this point, we are going to send the bill. We are going to send this bill to Michael Batiste, the Garyite who paid this very expensive 3-course meal we just had here.
Yeah. I suppose he'll join you when we're talking about the NNP.
Well, of course, because absolutely, because whenever the new National Party decides to have a convention, we are going to have the same conversation. Whenever they decide to have a convention, they have not announced a convention for this year. They have not announced a lot of things for this year at all. But let's see what happens in the future in respect of the new National Party. A lot to follow on that scale as well. So, Mr. Joseph, thank you again for appearing on the Bubb Report, again on such short notice. I know that you were traveling last week, so I thank you for being flexible and for coming here with us today.
My pleasure indeed, and thanks a lot, and thanks to your listeners. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Our viewers and listeners, Mr. William Joseph, he was a former public servant, also a former avid member of the National Democratic Congress, at least on the front line. Of course, I don't think his political loyalties have changed since then, but he's someone that has a lot of institutional knowledge around the National Democratic Congress, and that's why we felt it was important to have an expert such as himself to articulate and talk about today's convention. On behalf of the producers of the Bubb Report, I'm your humble servant, Dr. Kellen Bubb, wishing everyone a pleasant week. Take care now. Bye-bye.